Hello, I'm here to tell you a story celebrating Black History Month. And you know, sometimes when people tell stories about Black History Month, they'll tell a true story about somebody that you all know who's famous, like Dr. Martin Luther King, like President Barack Obama, like Rosa Parks. And then sometimes when they tell a story celebrating Black History Month, we tell stories by Black authors, somebody who has written a story about Black people or not. And sometimes when we celebrate Black History Month by telling stories, we tell what's called a Black folk tale. Folk tales are usually passed down from generation to generations. Sometimes they're not written down, sometimes they are. And today, to celebrate Black History Month, I'm going to tell you a folk tale about when the Africans could fly. They say that back a long time ago, there were special Africans who could fly. They could walk on the air like they were walking up a ladder. Special people. Well, when they were captured into slavery, they shed their wings. There was no room in the slavery boat for wings, and so they had to shed them. But they were still special people. Being in the slavery ship and getting to the new land and being held captive, they forgot about flying, but they were still special people. Now, there was one slave who had been one of those special people in Africa. His name was Toby. And he was on a plantation. And where he worked, there was the man who owned the slaves, and they called him Master. And there was the one who would see if any of the slaves were slowing down. They called him the Overseer. And then there was the one with the whip who would crack that whip on the slave's back to make them speed up. And they called him the driver. Also on that plantation with Toby was a girl, a young lady who had those special powers also. And her name was Sarah. Well, one day, Sarah was in the fields and she had a baby, and she had the baby strapped on her back. And she was working in the fields as hard as she could, and the baby slept. Well, after a while, the baby woke up and the baby was hungry. So what do babies do when they're hungry? It started to cry. And the overseer said, "Shut that thing up right now." Sarah could not stop, because then she would have been accused of falling behind. She couldn't feed her baby. She couldn't hold it and caress it. She had to keep working in the fields. And the baby did like babies do when they're hungry. It cried some more. And the overseer said, "I said, shut it up right now." Well, the driver took his whip, cracked it over Sarah's back, and the baby yelled out in pain. Toby was there immediately, and Sarah looked up at Toby and said, "I can't stay here much longer." And Toby said, "Soon, daughter, soon." Sarah was down on her knees, going as fast as she could, working in the fields. And the overseer and the driver got ready to crack that whip again, and Toby was there, and he said, "Now, daughter, now." And Sarah looked up, and she started to chant the magic words the people say. They could not understand them, but it sounded kind of like kumbaya, 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 kumbaya. And Sarah started to rise up off the ground. It was almost like she was walking on clouds. She walked timidly at first, and then after a while, she started to glide. She went over the treetops, and the overseer and the driver's whips could not touch her. And soon she was flying high. Nobody said anything, because nobody wanted to be punished. The next day was blazing hot, and one of the men working in the fields fell. And when he fell, the driver said, "Get up!" And he flashed that whip, and Toby went to him and said, "Rise, son, rise now." And then another fell, and another, and another, and another, and Toby stood and said, "It is time." And in the fields, you could hear the moaning, "Kumbaya, kumbaya, kumbaya, kumbaya." And those that knew how to fly, those with the magical powers, grabbed hands, and they started to rise up, rise up. And the owner, the master, his pistol could not stop them. The whips could not stop them. And the master said, "Get Toby." And Toby smiled and said, "You don't know who we are. We are special. We're the ones who can fly." And Toby started to fly behind the special slaves who had the magical powers. He looked back, and he saw the other slaves in the fields, and their eyes said, "Please, take us too." But Toby couldn't. He said, "You'll have to wait until you can escape, run, to be free." Those slaves in the plantation told it at night. Those slaves at the plantation told it when they did escape to freedom. The master said it was a trick of the eye, it didn't happen. But I'm here to tell you that it did. They were special. They could fly. We have those today that can still fly. Dr. Martin Luther King, he flew. President Barack Obama, he flew. Vice President Kamala Harris, she flew, because they are special. They are magical. And you can fly too.